So I'm recording my homily for the 30th Sunday of Ordinary Time. Today's actually Halloween, and you can tell it's very much fall here. Beautiful day. I want to just continue with my homily from last week, and so I'm focusing on a theme rather than entirely focusing on the gospel readings, but I will bring up the gospel readings for this Sunday, this last Sunday. So the theme has been on money. Now, last week I talked about how remember, money in and of itself, treasure, material possessions, in and of themselves are neutral. They're not good, they're not bad, but how we use them, how we approach them, how we embrace them in our heart can either be good or bad. Okay, so if you ever want a book that really challenges us, and it challenges you in how you understand those types of things, Fire Within by Father Thomas Dubay is really, really good. And so the how we approach attachments is one chapter in that book. But last week I talked about how money can become something bad, how we can use it in a bad way. And we could summarize that just by corruption, right? The corruption of the heart, where we begin to desire the money as an end in and of itself, where we begin to just think of ourselves in terms of our possessions and our money. And so that corruption can either be in ourself, in our own heart, which as sinners it is at times. It can be in an institution, right? It can be in our government. We're in the midst of an election, okay? It can be in the government. It can be in the church, and it definitely has been and will continue to be, right? So corruption in and of itself is something that destroys. And so when we think about how we use our money, we want to make sure that we're not using it in that way, okay? Whether we're thinking of ourselves, our family, the company we work for, government, the church. All right. This week I want to talk about it in a more positive sense, and I'm going to differentiate between what is good and not good in that way. And so essentially what it comes down to is stewardship. Stewardship is good. So a steward is one who takes care, is a caretaker, one who desires to give of oneself in the care of another, which ties in perfectly with the gospel today, because the gospel today is very short, and it's the two commandments of Jesus Christ. To love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, right? So to love God more than anything else, so everything finds its context in that love for God, and then to love my neighbor as myself. And that last part's very, very important, to love my neighbor as myself. And so my neighbor is always in the forefront of my mind. How am I loving my neighbor? And so the context of everything I possess, whether it's my talents, my time, or it's my treasure, all of it is in the context of those two hubs, right? My love for God and my love for my neighbor. Now, what is stewardship not? Stewardship is not being a volunteer. Being a volunteer is not stewardship, in the sense that being a volunteer is optional. I can volunteer for something when it really is volunteering, right? Sometimes I hear the wife voluntolding their husband, right? Telling them to do something. But when we volunteer, it's like there's an option. It's like I can do it or not do it. And if I do it, it's great. If I don't do it, it's no big deal. Okay, so that's not stewardship. Stewardship implies that there is a necessity, that something needs to be done and I need to do it, or somebody needs to do it, right? But it implies something that's not optional. And so stewardship is not optional. Being a disciple, being a good disciple is not optional in the church. Sharing what I have is not optional as a Christian, as a Catholic. Sharing my time, my talents, whatever it may be, right? So those are the three things we talk about in stewardship. How I use my material possessions, my money, how I use my time, and how I use my abilities, my talents that God has given me, okay? It's not optional. And so we often use the word volunteer in the church But as my parish, as the parish here already knows, I'm already trying to start to train them away from that concept. And so when we go and do a stewardship drive for talent, we're not going to talk about volunteering at all, because we're only going to talk about what we need to be doing, each of us, in order to create a good, healthy, loving community. Okay, so it's not volunteering, because that implies option. Stewardship is not optional. Okay, I want to draw a little connection here. So I've been reading a book by St. John Chrysostom, and it's a collection of his homilies on marriage and the family life. And if you want to read it, it's by St. Vladimir's Press, St. John Chrysostom on marriage and the family life. And there's parts in there where he talks about the love of the husband and wife, and this complete consent, this complete self-gift of oneself to the other. And so the husband for the wife and the wife for the husband. And he says it's so beautiful, it's so powerful, and it's not optional. It has to happen, or else bad things happen. The marriage is never going to bear fruit if there isn't that necessity of giving of oneself. So I would say that's true in the church as well. Okay? All right. So stewardship is not volunteerism. Oh, please, no. All right. Stewardship is also not being an employee. Now, in the sense that one is doing it for money, okay, which is ironic since here I am talking about stewardship of money. But a steward is not looking at getting something in return. So here, it's like, I'll do this for you, but you do this for me. You give me this. Very appropriate in the business world. We all have jobs where we do a task, and we get paid to do the task, right? There's a transaction that happens. Hopefully it's just, hopefully it's good. Part of the business world, nothing wrong with that. That is not part of the church, though, in the sense of stewardship. Stewardship is when I do something and I don't expect to get anything as a reward for it. I don't expect to get anything back. Okay? Now I want to talk about that a little bit in terms of this pitfall of transactional understanding of church. When people come into the office and they want something, and they'll say, I'll give you this, if you give me this, that's transaction. Okay, so that's not stewardship. When somebody walks in the office and says, hey, can I do this for you? And I don't expect anything back, that's stewardship. Okay, very different. Now, fundraisers, the folks here in the parish are learning that I do not like fundraisers. And it's not that I don't like the time that we get together and do something fun, or we have a meal together, or something social about it. That's not what I'm saying. I enjoy that part, if it's part of a fundraiser. But what I don't like is the fact that fundraisers are transactional. You give me a pie, and I'll give you money so that your kids can go on a mission trip, right? You wash my car, and I'll give you money so that you can do it for this ministry. It's a transaction. It's not stewardship. Stewardship is, let's say a group comes forward and says, this is a mission, this is something that we're doing as part of our ministry, and we would like people to support it in the following ways. And so people then either, I was about to say volunteer, not volunteer, but people choose to be part of it, right? Because there's a need. Or they choose to give money to it as a way to support it, okay? Because there's a need. And they don't expect anything in return then. They're not going to get a pie, they're not going to get a t-shirt, they're not going to get a car washed. They're not going to play bingo, you know. So that's the difference. Now, am I saying that all fundraisers are evil or bad? No, I'm not saying that. But it's transactional. It's not stewardship, okay? So I think when we talk about a parish, we want the essential movement of our parish to be stewardship and not based on fundraisers. Okay. In a family, you know this is true, right? When you cook for your family, you don't expect your kids to pay you for it. Okay? One of the dangers that you'll see sometimes with families is kids, they'll say, well, Mom, I'll do this for you, but you need to pay me for it. And that's transactional, chores. Sometimes we pay our kids for the chores, but that's not stewardship. And so we want to train our kids that sometimes there's things that need to be done and not expect anything in return, because that's something more profound. It's something more noble. It's something more attractive. When people walk into the parish and they see people who want to, again, I was going to say volunteer, they want to participate, they want to offer themselves, and they don't expect anything in return, that's very attractive. It's very noble. It's not cheap, right? One of the changes I made here, and again, I just offer this as a thought on stewardship, in trying to root out this transactional nature that has infiltrated in the Catholic Church. And that is, when somebody wants a baptism, well, we have a fee for it, we charge for it. Or somebody wants a quinceañera, we charge for it. This has been a point of contention in our deanery, because some of the parishes feel like we should charge the same amount so that it's all even, so the families aren't shopping around. But we disagree on the principle of that, and I say, I don't want to charge. I don't want my parish to charge for anything, because I want to root out this idea that, you give me something, I'll give you something. Because that's, in my opinion, in the end, it's harmful to the parish. It's harmful to the mentality of the parish, because I want stewardship. Okay? A couple of things that are necessary for stewardship to be truly effective is to remember that it's based on relationship. It's based on love. And because of that, it calls forth something more beautiful. So I was mentioning this book by St. John Chrysostom, and he talks about how when a man is looking towards a woman to become his wife, he sees in her something so very noble, something royal, something set apart, something very beautiful, because it's in that he wants to give himself, right? And so it's not, she's so beautiful, she's so perfect that I'm going to now take her for myself, but it's I'm going to give myself to her. And so he talks about in the scriptures how in Genesis, as well as Jesus talks about how the two become one flesh. They give themselves to the other, and they really truly give themselves. So he would say that the man's body, the man's possessions, the man's intellect, everything becomes property of the woman, and the woman likewise becomes property of the man, in this equality and in this self-gift. But he describes it as something very noble. And so we need to understand our faith in the same way, and our participation in the church. The church is something very beautiful and noble. And so we want to give back to the church, back to the body of Christ, something beautiful. I was in a parish a little while back, in a different parish, and somebody had called me up and said, "Father, we got a couple couches that we want to donate to your youth group." And it was like, oh, okay. And it was like, so what is the condition of the couches? And he says, well, they're pretty beat up. They're not in great condition. We figured maybe the church would want them. So already I was getting a little irritated, because there's this assumption that, there's something not good enough for us anymore. We want to get rid of it. So let's give it to the church. And so we've lost a sense of nobility. And I'm not saying that the church needs luxurious items, but that we have a sense that the church is something beautiful. So I want to give my best. I don't want to give my worst. So in the conversation, I was talking about it, and I said, so what would you do with these couches if you didn't give them to the church? He said, well, we would take them to the dump. It's like, oh, you know what, when you think about it, it's like we were lower on the list than the dump. Because if they give it to us, they don't have to pay anything. Whereas if they take it to the dump, they have to pay something. So they said, hey, let's give it to the church so we don't have to pay anything. So we were below the dump on their list of priorities. Okay, now I would say, I'm not pointing fingers, but I would say that actually is common in the church. People will think of the church to donate some of their junk. The church is not a place of junk. It's noble, it's beautiful. You can tell that in a community by how people take care of the facilities, by how they take care of each other, by how they want to participate in ministries or don't want to participate in ministries. It's whether they see the church as being noble and beautiful or as being pathetic and junky. Stewardship is, I'm a caretaker because there's something beautiful and I want to be part of it. There's another part to stewardship that I want to talk about because we sometimes get this wrong in the church, and I include myself in this. Sometimes we think that love is an emotion, right? So it's like, hey, I love that homily you gave, Father, so I'm going to give a big donation, right? And so that's emotion, but that's not stewardship. When I was younger, when I was an engineer, before I was becoming, thinking about becoming a priest, there was a couple years where I had some money. And so when I went to Mass, if the homily really stunk, if the homily was really bad, I'd give like $1 for the collection. I mean, it was like, guy, Father, you didn't earn it. That was a bad homily. $1. If it was an okay homily, I would do what I thought was justifiable. I'd give $20, right, in the collection. If it was a really good homily, $40. If it was an awesome, phenomenal homily to the point where I would even think about becoming a priest, I'd give $100. None of that was stewardship. It was all emotion, And so stewardship goes beyond whether we like the priest that weekend or don't like the priest that weekend, or we like what's happening in the parish or we don't like what's happening in the parish. Stewardship is, I have to give no matter what. I have to give myself no matter what, because the church is bigger than just the priest's homily or the priest who's there at that time, or whether I'm getting along with these people or these people. Is so much more than that. It's just like a family. There's sometimes you may not love, I shouldn't say you may not love your spouse. You may not be getting along with your spouse really well, but you're still gonna love her. You're still gonna love him. You're still gonna act. You're still gonna do all the things that a married couple would do, and you know that if you persevere and you keep trying, that you'll find reconciliation and you'll work through the problems, right? Okay, your kids are irritating you. That doesn't mean you don't cook them dinner. So stewardship means is we keep doing the things we know we need to do as a steward of the community, even if we're maybe not having that emotional connection at that time. Every once in a while, I'll have somebody who's really upset with me or the parish or the church or the bishop or the pope or something, and they say, well, we're not going to give any money because of that. So that's not stewardship then. It never was for them. It was transactional. Faith was transactional. So we want to move away from that. Okay, what we're doing is we're elevating. We're taking it to a loving, a family-style relationship rather than a business-style relationship in the church. Okay. Now, I also want to say part of stewardship is trust. And so if trust has been broken, it's really hard to develop that love when trust is broken. Here at St. Mary's, at St. Anne's, at our mission, there was some trust that was broken, especially with regards to the finances. I think we're rebuilding it. I think we're doing a good job that way. But trust was broken. And because of that, it does make it harder. Now, I would say trust goes both ways, though. And so people need to be able to trust the leadership, that we're being good stewards of what they give us, that we ourselves are being good stewards, that the church is using their generosity wisely and effectively, and what the ways Jesus would want us to use it. And so that's necessary. But also, the other side of it is that the people are also being generous, that they're giving of themselves. On Saturday, I had a really busy day on Saturday, so I started the day with adoration before Mass, exposition, had a morning Mass on Saturday, had confessions, and then I had baptisms, then I had a wedding, then I had more confessions, and then I had the evening Mass. So it was a full day. And I'm not saying that one way or the other, it was a good day. But can you imagine if any one of those events I just decided, you know what, I'm not going to show up. Saturday was a beautiful day. I said, I'm going to go fishing instead. No, I don't go fishing, but you know what I'm saying? There was nothing optional about it. It was part of a relationship. People expected me to be there, and expected the choir to be there, and expected the sacristans to be there. And so there was something that was non-optional about that relationship, because we want to provide something for those people that's beautiful. And so when people think that their faith is optional, so Sunday rolls around, it's like, I really don't need to go. Then stewardship is broken. Trust is broken. When people don't come to Mass every single Sunday, trust is broken. When people don't participate in the Mass, trust is broken. If I do a slack-off job as a priest, trust is broken. Okay? Okay. I just want to tie it back, just to finish off, tie it back to the gospel. So the gospel is, loving God above all else and loving our neighbor as ourselves. All that's really saying is that is stewardship. That is stewardship. Jesus didn't put requirements on us how much money we're supposed to give. He says you give of yourself. You give yourself to something that's beautiful and noble. And if we put anything over our faith, then we're already losing stewardship. We're already losing the relationship. If we put anything over our neighbor, that shouldn't be over our neighbor. If we're becoming selfish, if we're using our money just in a selfish manner, then we're already losing. We're losing the two commandments. We're losing our relationship with God and our neighbor, and we're losing stewardship. Okay, I will keep talking about stewardship in the coming weeks, but not necessarily focusing on the money part. All right. God bless you. Happy All Saints Day tomorrow and All Souls Day.